Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Memory Dump, the semi-regular show where I essentially dump my thoughts on various gaming-related topics. Today's topic is going to be PCs versus console. Now first things first, I want to apologize for the delay since the last episode. I won't spend too much time explaining this. We'll get into the topic very shortly, but I did want to mention this. I was experimenting a little bit with what I wanted Memory Dump to be. Originally, I wanted it to be sort of a very edited, very produced kind of, we'll say, expression of my views. Everything was written out in detail, and I went ahead and I had a script that I looked at, and then after that, I was like, no, I need something that I can just sort of put my thoughts out on, sort of non-time sensitive subjects, things that are a little bit more broad reaching, that's not like current news. So then I started doing the talk about emulation and digital distribution and pre-orders, and so I was working on those, and then I started working on the PC versus console, and there's so much that I want to say. There's so many little factoids and points I want to address. This is a huge topic that I could easily make into a series of videos, so I got caught up in that, and it just wasn't coming out because it was taking so long for me to make. I think I'm kind of settling though on the idea of Memory Dump being more of an informed kind of rant/opinion piece. So there will be another full, I don't know if I'll make it a series or just a big video of PC versus console where I go into details on every one of the little, we'll say, details, nuanced little things about each platform, and source things and make it a decent production. But I did want to get my thoughts out about that because there's so many other things I want to talk about, and the topics are sort of stacking up behind me. And stacking up on, we'll say, the stack of topics I want to talk about, and I don't want to, I don't want to forget anything. I want to get that stuff out as it comes. So that's what Memory Dump's going to be. It's going to be kind of like a periodic, as balanced rant as it could be, opinion piece. Yeah. Anyways, so with that aside, let's go ahead and dive on into the topic of PC versus console. Now, first things first, what I like to do is, we'll say, disclose my bias. First things straight up front, that way there where I'm coming from with every point that I say. Honestly, my bias is I don't really have a preference. Well, I do, but I don't. I like things for different reasons. A lot of times I'll make, the PC Master Race jokes because they're just so easy. Like, honestly, it's low-hanging fruit, and that's what I go with. But to be honest, if you're a long-time viewer, I talk about all my consoles. I'd love to record my consoles. I just lack the hardware for it. I play my consoles constantly. Actually, sometimes I think I play it more than my PC, but those are my biases. So I figured the best way, we'll say, to get started here with the whole topic of PC versus console is actually to look at the origin. Because one common thing I hear about when the whole debate comes up is, well, gaming was born on consoles. Consoles started gaming, that's where it started, so they automatically win. First of all, that's a poor argument. It's a nonsensical argument, and it has no weight to it, so first of all, let's just disregard that. But if you really want to put the record straight, technically, consoles were basically a we'll say a home version of sort of the arcade experience, kind of, which in turn were sort of a variation off of the pinball machines, which were introduced back in the 1920s. So, if you want to go ahead and really give credit to anything, let's go ahead and say pinball machines are awesome. Yeah, there we go. Pinball Machine Master Race. There we go. End of discussion. Anyways, so, that's kind of how things started. So, we have our, we'll say, first console generation. You got the Magnavox Odyssey. No, it didn't start with the PlayStation, as many, I don't know, companies would like to believe that the generations line up with the PlayStation for whatever reason, but the Magnavox Odyssey started things off, and that was, I've already forgotten, was it 1966? It was, wait, I can't remember exactly when it was. Late 60s, yeah, we'll go ahead and say that, that's what it was. And there really wasn't any PC presence at all. PCs didn't exist. That was 60s. Things were still pretty expensive on the we'll say, the personal computer front. Actually, there were no really personal computers. The PC kind of entered things a little bit in, we'll say, during the second console generation with the Atari 2600 and the ColecoVision and all that. But really it was like what, in the form of like text adventures? We got stuff like Adventure, which was something Cave Adventure. I've already forgotten the name, but it was basically, you know, the old text adventure. I'm sure you've seen little parodies of, or a more well-known example, although I don't believe it came out during that time, I could be wrong, was Zork. It wasn't really I would say the third console generation where, you know, PC actually kind of started to have stuff, you know, like RPGs and stuff like that, you know, we'll say proper, you know, good proper games. Not saying that adventure games are not proper. I love adventure games. But, you know, that's when things will say, well, a sort of a mature point where the identity was a little bit more well defined. And one thing we see a lot in the early days of the consoles and PCs is, we'll say graphically, the consoles kick the crap out of PC. Let's just be straight up honest. You look at an NES game and you look at a PC game from around the same time, man, the NES kicks the crap out of PC graphically. But the PC, because it was designed originally more for like business purposes, it tends to have a lot more memory. So what tended to happen is consoles were a lot more geared towards fast-paced and graphical, a lot more like their arcade brethren, where they were kind of coming from. Whereas PCs, they didn't have that same kind of power, but they had a lot of memory. So they were able to have much larger games, a lot more to them, a lot more assets, and a lot more stuff to them without that restriction of memory. Now, I want to clear something up because there's a common argument. Maybe it's not that common, but I've seen this argument. I've actually seen this argument. And I think it stems from a lack of understanding of memory. See, well, there's actually multiple types of memory. We'll stick to the main two. You have your hard drive, you know, which holds basically your files and everything else. And then you have RAM, random access memory. The RAM is basically your scratch pad for your processor. That thing there is... RAM has a big impact on how quickly stuff can load and how quickly assets can be accessed and all that. I've heard arguments about, you know, well, the PlayStation 4 has a 1 terabyte version and people are talking about getting 64 gigabytes of memory for their PC. We'll take that PC. And whether or not the guys were trolling, it's an inequivalence. It's not the same thing. The 1 terabyte PlayStation is talking about hard drive space, not about RAM. I believe the PlayStation 4 has, what, 8 gigabytes of RAM? Which is a decent amount. I think it's 8. 4? 8? It's a respectable amount. It's a decent amount. But you can't compare those two things because they're not the same thing. And so back in the early, like they said, the early days, the consoles really had low RAM. And PCs had a lot more RAM, and they had more storage as well. So overall, PC had more memory. And what we've seen is, I find, as the generations go on, you know, consoles start to get a little bit more memory, a little bit more memory, a little bit more memory. And then, especially after, was it Generation 4, 5, around 1993, when a little game called Doom came out, you know, like, there were decent games before. But when Doom came out, there was this kind of like, hey, PCs can do stuff. Like I said, it could have come around before. It was around the same time, but there was definitely more of a, that's good, yeah. And like I said, I'm not going to credit Doom for that, but it definitely had, we'll say, a role to play in the whole thing. And you know, components started coming out for PC, and PC started to become more of a graphical powerhouse. And, you know, they've kind of been on a collision course since. I think we're seeing now that consoles are more like PCs than they've ever been. And, you know, some companies are trying to consoleize their PCs. So I honestly see them kind of going together, but I don't think they'll ever quite touch. I think they're going to get close to each other, we'll say, in performance and stuff, but they still kind of serve two completely different needs. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later in the video. Now, before we, like I said, we go ahead and talk about, we'll say, my core point between the whole PCs versus console, I want to look at some, we'll say, common arguments I've heard against or for each one. This list is in no way, say complete. It's not exhaustive. These are just a few of the ones that I've heard, and I just wanted to address these ones at least. So, I actually went into my EB Games several times, and I was buying some fighting games like Soul Calibur and stuff that are not available on PC. And they had made a comment or something, and I basically mentioned, oh yeah, well, I'm picking them up because I can't get them on my PC. And I was told a couple times, wow, it's better on console anyways, and I'm just like, why? I was genuinely curious what the answer, and they said, well, you can play with a controller. A lot of people don't seem to understand that you can pretty much hook up anything to your PC. I play with a controller. I play with mouse keyboard. You can play with a driving wheel. I can play with a dance pad on my PC. PC's so open that you can pretty much get anything to work with it. And people could go ahead and say, well, you gotta, fiddle with it. No, I just plug my controller in and I go. It's pretty easy. And that's, like I said, that's kind of an argument, that's sort of born out of, ignorance. I'm not trying to insult anyone. I'm just saying, if you don't know, you're not informed. The next argument I hear against PC is that it's expensive. There is a point to this. There actually is a point to this. A lot of, we'll say PC gamers will tout that, you can pay the same amount for a PC that will beat out the current generation consoles. No, actually you won't. You can make something that maybe that's comparable, but it's not quite true, especially when you consider the extra stuff that you got to get. You don't need to get a monitor. You could actually just hook it up to your TV. That's something you can go ahead and do. PCs can hook up to TVs, which is another argument I hear against PCs. Like, I just hook up my computer to my TV. There we go. But you do stuff to get, mouse, keyboard. You got to get Windows. Sometimes you don't always get Windows with your computer, especially if you're building it. But we'll say I hate to take, we'll say, this argument against PC and give it a sort of a point and then take away that point here. But the thing is, if you spend just a little bit more than what you have on the consoles, you can get a system that's a lot stronger. So it's like, it's more, PCs are more expensive, ultimately, but they're more cost efficient. So there is that kind of trade-off, but yeah, don't let anyone tell you that a PC for the same price as a console, you'll get the same performance, or you'll get better performance than a console. That's not quite true. Maybe if someone got some awesome sales and awesome deals, yeah, they could pull it off, but at regular price, not typically, at least not as of this video. Things change all the time, so. Another thing I've heard is unoptimized. Consoles are targeted, specifically on their hardware, and so that way they code down to the metal, and that way they can, the performance is better on console than it would be on an equivalent PC, and I don't think that has necessarily been really true since I want to say generation 5. Wait, not 5, 6. Basically, original Xbox. Basically, when the original Xbox came out, it was basically the direct Xbox. It was, you have, like I said, this is sort of a topic that'll probably go, I'll put a little bit more into my full video if and when that ever comes out. But you have your API, and that's typically what people are coding for. They're not coding straight to the hardware anymore. That's too much of a hassle. People don't want to do that. They want to get their software on as many different platforms as possible. So there's a sort of a common code base sort of, I'm not even sure if I'm using the right terms, but the API is like sort of a common code thing that people are coding on. They're not coding for the specific hardware. There are some hardware specific things that they have to do, so it's not entirely untrue. But we'll say the whole optimization for console versus PC based on, we'll say, coding to the metal is definitely not as true as it once was. Back in the Super Nintendo days, yeah, they were targeting specific chips and all this other crap. Totally true. Not so true anymore. It's an old argument, and I think that's something that else needs to be addressed. And this is why I wanted to look at, like maybe in another video, like I said, the whole the debate over time, because, you know, at different points in time, there was definitely, we'll say, clear winners here and there. Things change. Things aren't always the same. You know, console gaming could get back on top. For the longest time, consoles were, I will give it to them, they were the dominant gaming platform. They were big, they were huge, they had tons of exclusives, a lot of good games, technologically superior. But like I said, over time, they fell behind, and PC is now definitely caught up, and definitely a lot more convenient in a lot of ways. And that kind of brings me into my next point, where people say it's a hassle. You know, you gotta build your computer, and then you gotta deal with Windows. That's actually true. You know, I play games on my computer. My computer's a piece of crap, but I've used good computers before. And like I said, I'm a certified tech. I've worked on tons of computers, and, you know, just loading up a game, you know, you can have little problems that you don't foresee. Just something small in your computer, and your game just decides it doesn't want to launch because it doesn't like a certain thing, the way something's set up. And that is a legit argument against PC. You know, consoles, it does tend to be hook up console, play. I'm noticing, though, that the consoles are starting to have a little bit of that problem. You know, there's certain little quirks and hassles that really make it a pain. You know, I hooked up some of my consoles the other day. You know, I've hooked up my GameCube, I hooked up my Dreamcast, I hooked up my, what was the other one? I think those might have been my original Xbox. There we go. I hooked those up and I popped the disc in, away I went. I played my PS3 the other day, and I can't remember what it was, but it was basically complaining. It was like, oh no, you need to update this. Or I tried watching YouTube or Netflix on my PS3, and there was something up with PSN, and it's like, oh, we can't log in. Sorry, you can't use any online features. And it's a little bit of that, we'll say, lockdown sort of thing, and there's a little bit of a hassle. There was an error that came up, and it needed to fix the hard drive or something like that. And I'm like, you know what? I tried to come here. I went to my console so I wouldn't have that problem as I'm having with my wonderful computer here. And it turns out that, you know, the problems are starting to appear on console. So, yes, I would still say that PCs they definitely have more of a hassle than consoles. But consoles are starting to become a bit of a pain. I'm going to be completely honest about that. To be fair, though, I don't have a PS4 or an Xbox One, so, you know, things may be better. I haven't used one enough to be able to say, yes, they're getting worse, so I'm not entirely informed on that, and I'm letting you know about that so that you can factor that into, we'll say, my opinion. But the Wii U's technically of the same generation, and that thing's pretty wonderful to me, so yeah, maybe that is an indication that they're still pretty good. They're still better than PC in that regard. And I've heard actually the argument for drivers still come out. In this day and age, honestly, drivers are pretty automatic, they're pretty hassle-free, so my computer tends to do it itself. You know, there's a lot of things that just sort of remind you, like, click here to update your drivers. Done. And you're good to go, so that one's not too much of a problem. Now, the common arguments I hear about consoles, especially, this one comes up with first-person shooters, no mouse and keyboard. Yep, they don't have mouse and keyboard. It's funny to see the expensive argument for consoles as well, because, you know, they hear about PC. But the thing is, with consoles, it's like cheaper hardware, but you pay more for the games and for the fact that you have to pay to use online features, to pay to go online. And that's kind of true. I tend to buy from bargain bins. I did like to lag behind a little bit by a generation, so my games that I buy, they're not too expensive, so I don't really mind too much. But yeah, I don't pay to go online. I can play online for free on my PC, so that's definitely an advantage over there. Poor performance. It's to be able to offer the hardware at a cheaper price, it tends to have a little bit more limited performance, so you're not always getting as much performance as PC, because that's really relative, right? It says poor performance, well, compared to a PC, but on its own, is it really that bad? If within a vacuum, you know, a lower resolution, as long as the game plays well, it's still okay. To me, I personally prefer 60 frames per second. I think 30 is kind of on the line of what I even find acceptable, which is amazing, because if you've seen some of my videos, the frame rate's terrible. So I can deal with that because, you know, I don't, I'm not very rich and I have to deal with what I have. But, yeah, it's, they do have poorer performance than PC, but then there's also the whole costing to take into account. And then we've talked a little bit about it being a lockdown platform. And anyways, after all that, I want to come down to my main point. In a lot of debates, it comes down to power. Consoles are better because they're better, they're faster. PCs have better graphics. There's always this sort of graphical thing back and forth. But what I think that a lot of people are missing is you can't judge which platform is better solely based on numbers. And you might be saying, of course I can. It's objective fact. Yeah, it's objective fact that maybe something is more powerful. However, let's look at this economically. Economics is basically, if you look at economics, one of the prime, we'll say, focuses of when you start learning about it is that it's about the value people place on things. And, you know, I took marketing, I took economics, and one of the things is if you have two very similar products, and they both do the same job and they both do it just as well, how do you differentiate yours? And it's a lot of times, well, it's one little extra feature, one little thing here and there. And what happens is some people value different features and different things about products than other people. So so let's say if somebody values the ease of just hooking up a console, or like for example for myself, I hate Uplay. I refuse to have Uplay on my computer. So any, we'll say like Assassin's Creed game or like Ubisoft game, I actually buy on console because I would rather have it on there. I've actually bought some games on console instead of PC because I like owning my games. I have a real problem with DRM. To me, having DRM on something devalues it to me. And if most of the games on PC are all, you know, DRM ridden or laden, I might actually prefer to forego a little bit of performance and graphical fidelity for the convenience or for the luxury of knowing that, hey, I own my game and I'll be able to play it whenever, you know. And that is, we'll say, the inner economics. That is where I value, and basically that value that we place on things comes out, you know, in money. Money is basically just the physical manifestation of the value we place on things through our, we'll say, economic analysis. So to come out and say that PC is better than console because if you look at the numbers, you look at just the straight facts, it is better than console, is disregarding an entire aspect of the discussion. And you can go ahead and say, well, it has more power. Well, that's great for you, because if you value power, that's obviously going to weigh more on that side. But if there's other things you value more, you know, it can tip it, and it actually makes, you know, while on the surface, choosing a console might not seem like the wise choice, especially considering PCs can do so much more, if it's basically fit for purpose, if that's the purpose that the person wants to fulfill, if that's the thing the person wants, and the PC doesn't do it as well, then we'll say their economic analysis dictates that that thing is better. So a lot of this, the whole argument of PC versus console, basically what I've been talking about for the past 20 minutes, is irrelevant when you consider that some people value some things more than others. So, in essence, basically, there is no right answer. You like what you like. You buy what you want, and you enjoy it. It might sound like a cop-out answer, but really, it's not something that you can go ahead and really argue. Like you can go ahead and you can argue it, but you can't win the fight, especially unless you know what each person values. You know, there's misinformation, and you can inform the person that maybe this thing does fit their values more. But if they are informed and they ultimately still choose something else because it fits more with what they want, what suits their life, what their needs are, then that's the right choice. That's that. So yeah, that's pretty much my final point. Actually, I'm wondering if I should have started off with that thing. Nah, we'll leave it as is. So that's basically my, we'll say, quick and, well, maybe not so quick, but those are my, we'll say, my thoughts on PCs versus console. I want, like I said, I wanted to look at the, sort of set the record for a lot of the arguments, but then ultimately share that I feel that they both have merit. They both have a place. Just like how, you know, you've got a phone. You know, someone might think that a camera on a phone is just fine for taking pictures, but some other people might demand, no, I want a dedicated camera, you know, with the lenses and all this other stuff, and they're going to pay more for those higher quality pictures. So it's kind of a sort of a parallel that you can look at, that, you know, for some people, the phone might be just fine. For other people, it might not cut it. It depends on what the person needs. So yeah, that is it for this episode's topic. We're done with PCs versus consoles. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap things up. What is the next topic going to be? I've thought about this for a little while. Like I said, I've got a bunch of topics that I want to talk about, but this one here just keeps coming up, and my better judgment kept nagging at me, saying, Jason, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. It's not gonna end. It's not gonna be pretty. But I finally I finally settled on it. I said, you know what? No, we're gonna tackle it. We're gonna talk about. Oh, this is gonna hurt. Sexism in games. I said it. Holy crap. I can't believe I'm committing to this. Next time I'm gonna go on sort of a rant opinion piece thing on sexism in games. Until then, I'm gonna go ahead and, I don't know, buy some body armor, change all my passwords, and move. Anyways, if you like the content and would like to see more, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, leave it a thumbs down. Either way, let me know what you thought in the comment section. And if you have any thoughts on PCs versus console, or even on the upcoming, like I said, little spiel I'm going to be doing on sexism, go ahead and leave those in the comment section. Reminder, anything that is, we'll say, disrespectful, insulting, or generally in bad taste, I will go ahead and remove it without any second thought. So keep that in mind. But until next time, I'd like to ask you all to game on.